Stop everything right now. I need you to think about someone specific. Think about the person who made you feel like the most important thing in the world, and then, without warning, made you feel like nothing. Think about the person who had you checking your phone at 2 in the morning, the person who had you rehearsing conversations in the shower, trying to figure out what you did wrong. Got that person in your head? Now tell me, did you ever walk away from that relationship and wonder how you ended up so small? How someone who was supposed to love you or care about you or simply respect you somehow left you questioning whether you were even worth the effort? Because I'm willing to bet that you've asked yourself some version of this question. Why do I keep ending up here? And that right there, that quiet, exhausting question, that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. This video is about the one skill that dismantles that pattern completely. Not therapy buzzwords, not love yourself first. One specific cognitive skill that once you develop it makes toxic people functionally powerless in your life. I know that sounds too simple. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand why the simplest skills are the ones that take the most courage to use. Here's what a toxic relationship actually feels like from the inside. It doesn't feel like a trap. That's the thing nobody tells you. If it felt like a trap, you would have left immediately. Instead, it feels like potential. It feels like almost, like something that is this close to being what you need, and if you just tried a little harder, communicated a little better, loved a little more completely, it would finally become real. You felt that before, haven't you? That specific kind of hope that keeps you suspended, not happy, not miserable, just waiting. Waiting for the version of this person that showed up in the beginning. Waiting for the relationship to become what it briefly, convincingly pretended to be. And here's what really hurts. You weren't naive. You're not someone who ignores red flags out of stupidity. You saw things that bothered you. You felt the inconsistency. You noticed when the warmth disappeared. But there was always an explanation. Always a reason, always just enough tenderness inserted at exactly the right moment to reset your concern. The worst part is, you probably explained their behavior to other people. You defended them. You translated their cruelty into context. They're going through a hard time. They didn't mean it like that. You don't know them like I do. You became their attorney in a case you never should have been inside. And every time you did that, every single time you chose their explanation over your own felt experience, something got a little quieter inside you. Your instincts, your own perception of reality, your ability to trust what you were actually seeing. Right now, some of you are repeating this pattern, not with the same person, maybe with a new one, but the same dynamic, the same waiting, the same translation work. Stay with me, because this gets darker before it gets better, and the dark part is exactly what you need to understand. Here's what's actually happening. Let me walk you through the specific skill toxic people rely on most and why it works so devastatingly well on intelligent, empathetic people in particular. The skill is this. They are extraordinarily good at making you doubt your own perception. There's a clinical term for this. You've probably heard it, gaslighting. But I don't want to use that word casually because most people hear it and think it means lying. It's more precise than that. Gaslighting is a systematic process of perception replacement. It's not just they lied to you, it's they convinced you that what you experienced did not happen the way you experienced it. Let me break this down step by step, because once you see this mechanism clearly, you cannot unsee it. First, they establish authority over your emotional reactions. Early in the relationship, every time you expressed a concern, it was reframed as an overreaction. You're too sensitive. You're reading into things. You always do this. Notice the language. Not, I understand why you felt that way, but here's my perspective. Instead, a verdict. Your perception is wrong. Done. They didn't engage with your experience. They dismissed the legitimacy of having it. Imagine a child who is learning to read. Every time they attempt to sound out a word, an adult grabs the book and says, "No, you're wrong. Stop trying." Eventually, that child stops attempting to read, not because they can't, but because the act of trying has been made to feel foolish. That's what happens to your instincts inside a toxic relationship. They don't disappear. They get shamed into silence. Then they create unpredictability to maintain your focus. Here's what's actually happening inside the psychological structure of this dynamic. When reward and punishment are unpredictable, when warmth and coldness arrive on a schedule you cannot map, the human brain does something wild. It becomes more attached, not less. This is called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Your brain releases dopamine not when you receive the reward, but in anticipation of it. The uncertainty is the drug. So when they were cold, you didn't detach, you pursued, you problem-solved, you increased your effort to recover the warmth. And when the warmth occasionally returned, it felt like a victory you had earned. Your brain logged it, effort leads to love, and the cycle locked in. This isn't weakness, this is basic mammalian neurology being exploited with precision. And finally, they erode the one thing you need most to leave. Here's where it gets really dark. Stay with me because this next part explains everything. The one thing you need to exit a toxic relationship is trust in your own perception. You need to be able to look at a pattern of behavior and say, this is real, this is happening, this is not okay. That's it. That's all it takes. One clear, uncontested moment of self-trust. But what has the entire relationship been training you to do? To contest your own perception, to second-guess your own read, to run every observation through a filter of, but maybe I'm wrong. They didn't just hurt you, they systematically disabled the exact cognitive faculty you would need to recognize you are being hurt and act on it. This isn't personal. Let me be clear about that. This isn't betrayal born from a specific hatred of you. It's a pattern, often unconscious, that developed in people who were themselves denied healthy emotional mirroring in early life. They learned to survive by controlling the perceptions of people around them. They've been doing this since long before they met you. That doesn't make it acceptable, but it removes it from the category of your fault and places it where it belongs, in the category of their unresolved architecture. Once you see this, you will stop asking what is wrong with me. You will start asking the right question. But here's what nobody tells you. The skill they used against you, perception management, reality framing, narrative control, that skill works in both directions. And the version of it that protects you is not complicated. It is not advanced. It is in fact the most fundamental cognitive act a human being can perform. It is simply this: trusting what you actually observe over what you were told to believe. That's the one skill. That is it. I know that sounds underwhelming. I know some of you are waiting for something more elaborate, a system, a set of tactics, a psychological counter-strategy with steps and diagrams. But here's what's actually happening when people keep entering toxic relationships. It's not a deficit of knowledge, it's a deficit of permission. Permission to believe what they already see. You are not someone who lacks intelligence. You are not someone who is broken or perpetually damaged. You are someone who was trained, systematically trained to override your own signal. Let me reframe something that may have felt like your greatest weakness. The fact that you stayed, the fact that you tried, that you advocated for the relationship, that you worked to understand them, that you translated their behavior into something livable, that is not stupidity. That is an extraordinary capacity for loyalty and effort. The problem was never your willingness to love. The problem was that your willingness was being exploited by someone who had no intention of meeting you in the middle. Their inability to show up for you is not a verdict on your worth. Read that again. Their inability to show up for you is information about their limitations. It tells you exactly who they are and what they are capable of. Nothing more, nothing less. You are not too much. You are not too emotional. You are not too needy. You are someone who wanted a real relationship from someone who is only capable of performing one. And I know what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, but what if I pushed them away? What if I was difficult? Here's the truth. A person with the capacity for genuine intimacy does not become permanently unavailable because their partner had needs. That's not how it works. That's not what love does. People who are capable of real connection work through difficulty. They don't use difficulty as a justification to withdraw, punish, or disappear. The evidence was always there. Your instincts knew. You just weren't allowed to trust them. Now you are. Let me tell you exactly what this looks like in practice. Developing perceptual trust is not a passive process. It requires deliberate, consistent practice. Here is what that practice looks like. First, you stop explaining their behavior better than they do. This is the first action step, and it is the most important. The moment you catch yourself constructing a generous narrative for someone's harmful behavior, one they have not offered themselves, you stop. You notice it. You say to yourself, I'm working harder to understand their actions than they are to explain themselves. That gap, that specific gap between your effort to understand them and their effort to explain themselves is data. That is the first sign. Watch how they respond when you express a need. That reaction tells you everything. A person who is capable of the relationship you're looking for does not become cold or contemptuous when you have a feeling. They might struggle, they might need time, but they do not use your vulnerability as a weapon. Second, you learn to sit with the discomfort of an unresolved narrative. Here's what makes perceptual trust difficult to develop. When you override your instincts, there's a short-term emotional reward. The anxiety of something is wrong here gets temporarily replaced with the relief of I've found